Welcome back to another edition of the BrownsZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast. The preseason is done, and now it's time to start looking ahead to the regular season, which, of course, kickstarts this coming Sunday. Happy to have you along for the ride. Andy Barch here with AM 930 WEOL, joined as always by Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle, Telegram, Edina Gazette, and also, of course, BrownsZone.com. Scott, ready to rock and roll for week one?
I am. It's about time, huh? We've been waiting for this for a long time.
Yeah, the anticipation has been building for a very long time. This year especially, with all the hype, and as good as this team has looked on paper for a very long time now, I think everybody is certainly busting at the seams ready to get this season started. Let's begin with some of the surprise cuts. There were some names that were given the pink slip at the very end of training camp. Who were some of the most surprising names that you saw on that list of cuts?
Yeah, there's always a few surprises. I didn't think there were any real shockers. To me, the move that stood out the most, and it's partly for the guy who made it and partly for the guy who's cut, is at punter. You know, I didn't think Britton Colquitt would be cut. I thought he was going to make the team. He's consistent. He was good. He, set the franchise record for net punting yardage 2 years ago. And then, Scottish Hammer, Jamie Gillen comes in, and he's got a huge leg, but he's not as consistent. He'd never held much before for the place kicks. So I thought they would go with Colquitt just kind of for stability purposes, but they couldn't say no to the potential of Gillen, that huge left leg he has. So that surprised me. I would say Braxton Miller, the receiver, used to play quarterback at Ohio State. I thought he had opened enough eyes. He showed up at camp late, not showed up late. They picked him up late. I thought he opened enough eyes in the last 2 weeks that he'd get a spot. But then as we see, the Browns traded for a receiver and claimed another receiver, so they had other ideas there. And then it often gets overlooked, but Sunday, the Browns claimed 3 guys, and then they have to waive guys, so they waived Trevin Coley. He's a defensive tackle, more of a run stopper than a pass rusher, but he started 29 games over the last 2 years for the Browns. So, I think he's a guy that should play in this league, will play in this league, and the fact that the Browns felt okay cutting him shows you the depth they have on that defensive line.
What do you make of that Braxton Miller cut? Because I think everybody thought, boy, they signed him late in camp. There's got to be something there. And at least early on, it seemed like he looked okay in camp. It didn't seem like there was anything that would have restricted him from making the roster. But, what was it that caused the Browns to go out and make a trade for another receiver?
Yeah, that's a good question. Freddie Kitchens talked about it a little bit on Monday and said, hey, he's a good player. He belongs in this league. It just wasn't the right fit at this time. To me, John Dorsey looked across the league, saw Taywan Taylor from Tennessee, who they wound up trading for, and said, I like him in that role better. He's the slot guy. He can play some slot. He's got some speed like Braxton does. And I just think he thought maybe he's a little bit younger. We like his upside better, and that's the direction he went. So to me, it was almost a 1-for-1. We like Taylor better than we like Miller. Let's go that direction.
Well, let's go another direction here and take a look at the offensive line. The Browns made a couple of trades for offensive linemen, which certainly isn't a big surprise.
Right.
And I think everybody that saw that Week 3 game, the alleged dress rehearsal, saw, oh boy, if this is the 5 that we're going into Week 1 with, there could be some issues. So what exactly will Wyatt Teller and Justin McCray add? Is it just for depth, or is there something more at play here?
Well, it's really interesting. Number one, I don't think you trade for 2 guys there's no way you trade for them if you're comfortable, right? If you're satisfied with your O-line. The second half of that is it just for depth, or is it a challenge for Eric Kush at right guard? And that's how I'm reading the situation. I mean, we keep talking to Freddie Kitchens, and he's had a million opportunities to say, I love Eric Kush, he's my guy. And he hasn't said it once. So on Monday, he says, I expect Eric Kush to be the starter Sunday, but we won't make that decision until the end of the week, which still leaves the door open for Teller or McCray to come in and blow his socks off between now and Friday. And that just means they're looking to replace Eric Kush, and they gave themselves 2 more options to do it, right? Austin Corbett wasn't getting it done. Drew Forbes got hurt. So now you have 2 other guys that can come in. Both have started a bit in the league, just like Kush has. But Teller's a younger guy. He was a 5th-round pick a year ago, started 7 games as a rookie. McCray has a background with line coach James Campen from Green Bay, so there's familiarity there. Has a good story, was out of football for 2.5 years. until 2017 when he got another chance with the Packers. He was playing in the Arena League. He was a bellman working at a resort in Florida. So Cush will probably start Sunday just because there's a sense of continuity there, and he's been there for a month now. But I would not be shocked at all if week 2 or week 3, whatever week it is, and it could even be Sunday, you see Teller step in to see if he can be the guy, because I think the Browns feel like he has an upside. You don't trade. I mean, he's a guy that's probably going to get cut by Buffalo or may have gotten cut, and the Browns traded for him, and they traded a draft pick, which means they see something in him.
Yeah, and he's a guy, too, that didn't start at all until I think it was week 10 last year. Is that right? And he started the last 6 or 7 games of the season, so I think durability, at least in the second half of his rookie year, something to be said for that. But you're right. It seems to me when you make trades for 2 offensive linemen, it says a lot of things. Number one, it says they weren't too pleased with that right guard spot. Right. I mean, while you said Cush is out there playing every day, there's something to be said for continuity, but I think it's got to be more about creating more competition for a spot that nobody seems to be able to lock down.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think they want options. I don't think they wanted to go into the year and Cush struggle week 1 and week 2, and then what are the options? Do you go to Austin Corbett, who you didn't like to begin with, in that role? So at least these are 2 other guys that are a possibility that they're an upgrade, and I think they know exactly what they'll get in McCray, right? Because Campen was with them for 2 years. He knows we can put this guy in here and he's not going to kill us. Or we think he's better than Cush. Whatever the bottom is for him, kind of the floor, they're comfortable enough with that. So, we've talked about it before, Andy. This line is going to be key to what this offense does because I think they're set at just about every other spot. So if they get solid play at left tackle or right guard, it really, to me, only has to be one of them because you can kind of mask the other one, but you can't have 2 holes there. So, they're either trusting Greg Robinson and then they're going to figure it out at right guard, or they need somebody to step up at right guard so then they can kind of give all their help to Greg Robinson at left tackle. And one of those 2 positions has to step up for this offense to be what it wants.
Well, you had mentioned a name I want to bring back up again, and wide receiver Taywan Taylor. Of course, they traded for him, got him from Tennessee, and well, it's not necessarily what he could do on the field that's made the most amount of noise the last couple of days. It's the information that he can provide on a scouting report on the Browns' Week 1 opponent on Sunday and the Tennessee Titans. So what else can he add besides a scouting report for the Titans?
Right. Well, I mean, that's interesting in itself that, the Browns gave up a 7th-round pick, which, it's still a pick, but, that's about as low as you can get when you make a trade. So the Titans were comfortable enough giving up a guy and giving him to the team that they knew they were going to play week 1. So I question the decision there from the Titans GM. I wonder if the coaching staff would have made the same trade because they're in the trenches and in those meeting rooms, not kind of looking above saying, oh, it's a good big picture move. Having said that, I think Taylor gives you another option in the slot. He has speed, and he said he ran a 4.45, but he's got more field speed is what he said. And that's the reports out of Tennessee, that he gives you that element of speed. And that's something the Browns are missing, especially when Callaway's not in there, right? Jarvis isn't super fast. Rashard Higgins isn't fast. Obviously, Odell is. But you need that second guy with some speed. And Ratley has some speed to him, but, he barely played in the preseason. So it gives you that. And there's quotes out of Tennessee yesterday that implied that maybe he wasn't always in the playbook. And maybe he didn't have all the offense down. And that was one of the reasons they kept a different receiver over him. So Freddie Kitchen said, we're going to give him one spot to learn because it's late. He's getting here late. You can't learn the whole playbook. Instead of asking him to learn X, Y, and Z, the receiver spots, they're going to put him in one and give him a package and try to get him up to speed there, where I think he can have some kind of impact relatively early. Obviously, with Odell and Jarvis and Higgins, he's not going to play a ton. But if you can get him out, if you need him out there for 10 snaps and you can do certain things with him, I think he can have a role.
Why is it that you don't hear more about this? Because you do see guys get cut. They spend a lot of time in camp. They've got their nose deep in the playbook. Yep. And, of course, these kinds of guys get cut late in camp all the time. They resurface with somebody else. Maybe these guys don't make as much noise as Taylor did after he exited. But why is it you don't hear more about that? Guys learning playbooks from other teams, then they get released or traded and go somewhere else, and they see those teams later on down the line.
You know what? I think it's almost team specific. There's certain teams that really value that inside information. I can see a Bill Belichick kind of bringing in guys just to pick their brains, and if he learns two details, then he considers that a success. Well, I think some teams figure, not it's a waste, but, we're setting our ways. This is how we're going to prepare. We don't want to get bogged down with kind of extra information. So I think it depends on the team. But I flash back to last year when Hugh Jackson went to Cincinnati. You would talk to some people thought it was incredibly valuable for him to have all that information on both sides of the Browns, about the defense, about the offense. And then you talk to people, oh, it's overrated. He doesn't know what we're doing, or we're going to change our calls. And I find that hard to believe. Like, I think if you spend 4 months or 6 months working on something, that information is valuable. And there's a reason we're not allowed to film parts of practice. And there's a reason they don't let outside media watch practice. So if everything's a secret, then it can't be meaningless when somebody changes teams at the last minute and knows a lot of stuff. So I do think it can be valuable. It probably doesn't make the difference in a win or loss. I guess it depends on the game. But I find it hard to believe that if a guy came over and said, hey, these are the 8 plays we've been running every day, how that wouldn't be helpful to the Browns.
Sure. And I mean, look, a lot of that you try and cover up a little bit. Maybe you mask it to some degree, but you can't mask all of it. You're right. That information is extremely valuable.
Yeah, and there's tendencies, and there's, hey, we like this guy on third down. We like, we're going to run Derrick Henry's a first and second down guy, but we're going to Deion Lewis, whatever. And maybe those things become clear in the game, but maybe snap 1 instead of snap 22, and that gives you an edge.
Absolutely, it does. Again, you're locked into the BrownsZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Chronicle, Telegram, and BrownsZone.com. Got to ask you about the kicking game because other than right guard, that seemed to be the spot that was looked at with the most amount of scrutiny throughout camp. So what made Seibert really kind of stand out with this kicking decision?
Well, it was the fact that he was a fifth-round draft pick. I think that gave him the edge the entire time. And I had Greg Joseph ahead throughout, I'm going to say, the first 2.5, 3 weeks of camp, and I didn't think it was close. And then Joseph fell off. He missed a kick in the first 2 preseason games, and then he didn't kick again in the preseason, but he missed in practice. So he opened the door for Seibert, who, in my opinion, was the guy that the Browns wanted to win the job because they spent a fifth-round pick on him. So obviously they liked plenty about him when they drafted him. And then he made it an easy decision by going 8 for 8 in the last 2 games. And he looked better in practice. But when you go 8 for 8, when the job's on the line, that doesn't mean he's going to make a kick Sunday against Tennessee. It just means if you're the guy making the cuts, like John Dorsey, you can either feel good about it or at least feel like you have the evidence behind you for why you made that pick. And that's how I felt about Seibert. It would have been interesting to see, number one, if they let Joseph kick in that finale, which they originally were, but then they said, no, we're going to let Seibert try to back up that Tampa Bay performance. Or if Seibert had missed a kick or two, what they would have done.
Yeah, and look, pressure kicks can certainly be determined pressure kicks by those watching the game in a preseason and thinking, you know what, It's just a preseason game, but those are 8 pressure kicks, knowing that your job is on the line.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And he didn't have a lot of those at Oklahoma, right? They're blowing teams out. They scored a bunch of touchdowns. So, and it's hard to translate anyway. The best college kickers come in the NFL and struggle, and guys you never heard of come in the NFL and are fine. So, but you're right. He knew his job was on the line. He knew. I mean, you could not to exaggerate, but maybe his NFL future was on the line, right? You never know if you're going to get another shot with the team. It's a kicker. You show up at a kicking tryout and you miss 2 and you're not around anymore, and then maybe you get blackballed kind of thing. So I think it is meaningful that he made those kicks, but now it has to translate to the regular season.
Yeah, and we will see on Sunday. We'll get right into this Game 1 preview, Browns and Titans. And, boy, it's fascinating to me because the first week of the season oftentimes gives you a glimpse into how the rest of the year just might go. And, clearly for the Browns, that's meant not very well in seasons past. But this year's different. I mean, the expectations way, way different than they have been at least the last 11 or 12 years. You could certainly make the argument the last 20 and change. But, this is a franchise that has traditionally struggled in the first week of the season. They've not won an opener in 15 years. So I guess we can start with the psychology of this. How much good does a win do here, knowing that this franchise has struggled in week 1? And on the reverse side of that, how much of the psychology will affect these guys if they lose week 1?
I think it means more in that regard to the fans, because the fans have gone through it, right? The fans, I mean, the Browns came back in 99, so this is year 21, right? Opener 21. The Browns are 1-19. 2004 was the only one. So fans know how it goes when you start 0-1. And then there's a big stat out there. If you go teams that go 0-2, the percentage of them making the playoffs dips dramatically from 1-1 to 0-2. And usually that's meaningless for the Browns because you know they're not going to go to the playoffs. But this year would be different. This year it's a stat we'd be paying a lot close attention to if the Browns happen to go that way. As far as the players, I think, and it's tough because there's 53 guys and 53 mentalities, but I would say overall there's so much confidence in that team, on that team, that a loss against the Titans wouldn't wreck that. I think OBJ is still going to be confident. Baker's going to be overconfident. That's just how that team is. Having said that, we've talked for months about how good this team is going to be. Not us. I mean, when I say we, I mean national media. I mean, everyone is talked about, everyone connected to the NFL has talked about the Browns and how good the roster is and how talented they are. So I think it is important for that to translate and translate with a win. At home, they're going to be favored. Tennessee's a good team, but they're not a great team. So it's big. I think the Browns will be able to rebound. They should be able to rebound if they lost that game, but it then puts a ton of pressure on week 2, right, going into the Jets on Monday night. And I think just a win week 1 would just kind of be that, confidence builder. It would just be, yeah, that's what we expected. It would kind of be an affirmation of this is the roster we built, John Dorsey built. We went out and played well. This is how it's going to be this season. But I'll also say this, Andy. I look at this schedule, and the first 8 games, I want to say, I think these are the 2 easiest they play. Maybe it's the first 7. And up and through that New England game coming off the bye. So if they don't go 2-0, I think not there's reason to worry, but then it gets harder, and then you can see some losses possibly crop up on that schedule. So I think it's important, big picture, can they win the AFC North? Can they get to the playoffs? These are 2 AFC games, could be involved in tiebreakers. I think it's critical that they go at least 1-1, but I think 2-0 is doable, and that's what the goal should be. I think that's crucial that they go 2-0.
Having said all of that, what are a couple of really big keys in your mind to a Browns win on Sunday?
Well, I think it's going to be a different type game because Tennessee isn't the Chiefs, right? They don't throw it 50 times. Mike Vrabel, the head coach, first of all, he's going to come in here intent on beating the team. He grew up around here. He went to Walsh, Ohio State. Old school kind of guy. So I think Tennessee's going to load up and they're going to run the ball. You might see Mariota run the option, which means that takes some of the Browns' best. It kind of minimizes what they do best, meaning the defensive line and pass rush, right? If Mariota's running the ball, Myles Garrett's not sacking him, right? Olivier Vernon's not running free off the edge. So I think the key is you got to play really good run defense. And you don't get enough of that. You don't see enough of that in the preseason to know if the Browns have made that improvement. They weren't good last year against the run. Now they got Sheldon Richardson. They got Vernon. But we don't know if that's going to translate either. So I think the key is stop the run, make Mariota throw, try to get a lead because then you make Mariota throw if you get a lead, right? He's got no choice but to do that. And so, look at an under-the-radar guy, Darius Taylor. He's a linebacker. We haven't talked about him. Signed in free agency, started with Tampa for a good chunk of last year. He's your third guy in the base defense, third linebacker. The Browns rarely go to their base defense, but if Tennessee lines up with a fullback, that's what they're going to be in. So I think Taylor and Joe Schobert and Chris Kirksey are going to have to step up and stop the run. And I'm not worried about the defense, period, but there's an area to worry about, it would be the linebacking group.
Going to be interesting to study that linebacking group all throughout the course of the year because there's some depth now. I think the Browns are pretty excited about the youth and experience combination there, but that's the kind of group I think that will really be looked at the first couple weeks of the season. All right, well, coming up on Thursday, you've got your season preview. Everybody very excited about that. Let's get us a little glimpse here into what we will be reading on Thursday in the Browns season preview.
Yeah, well, the cover story is going to be a look at how they went from 0-16, 1-31 to where we think they are, right, which is on the verge of a playoff run. And I try to take a look at the 10 kind of steps, the 10 moves that got them from there to now. And I'm not going to give it all away, but it starts with John Dorsey, right? You got to get a guy that picks the players. And Sashi Brown was not that guy. John Dorsey has proved to be that guy in Kansas City and here. And that started it. And then number two, and you could probably argue which one's number one, which one's number two. Maybe it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing. But number two to me is Baker Mayfield. And you can't do it without a quarterback. All the optimism is because they finally have a quarterback. But the reason I went Dorsey number one is not everybody would have taken Baker Mayfield. And John Dorsey did, and that was a risky move, and he made it. So, those are the two main ones. And then, I go through the list, Myles Garrett and OBJ and so on. So that's the cover story. And then I have a long Q&A with Demarius Randall. Sat down with him for a half an hour. We cover a bunch of stuff. We mentioned it real quick last week. I mean, he thinks that they're going to blow teams out this year. I transcribed it last night, and he talks about maybe 8 games where we should blow teams out. And then he talks, why can't we be a team that goes 16-0? And that's his personality. He's not guaranteeing 16-0, but it shows you the confidence level he has in the talent on the roster. And he spends a lot of time talking about John Dorsey and what makes him special. And then we have Jim Ingram will have a column, and then I'll have my annual season predictions where I say what I think the Browns are going to do and how the rest of the league's going to play out.
Are you able to give us an idea as to what you expect from the Browns? You expecting playoffs this year?
I am. You know what? I've been stuck on 10-6 for months, and maybe it's just me being stubborn that I haven't moved off of that, but I have a hard time getting myself to 11 wins just because that's a really special season. There's not a lot of 11-win seasons across the NFL year in and year out. And while Demarius Randall says, why can't we be the team that goes from 0-16 to the Super Bowl? I think that's harder to do than he thinks it is. I just think an organization is an organism and is a unit. It's hard to go to make huge strides year after year. And they made a 7.5-win jump last year. It just seems to me hard to make another 3.5-win jump. So, and stuff goes wrong, right? You lose close games. Guys miss kicks. You get a bad call. A guy gets hurt. So I'm stuck on 10-6. I think in the preview I say that's going to be enough to win the division. I think they need to go 4-2 in the division to do it. It might come down to tiebreakers because I think Pittsburgh is going to be better than people think, which means they're going to be borderline 10-6 too. So I could see the Browns going 10-6, tying Pittsburgh, and winning the tiebreaker. And then they host a playoff game, win a playoff game, go on the road and lose to a team like Kansas City or New England.
I want to stay on that for just a minute because a lot of people think that Pittsburgh's the team that everybody needs to be worried about around here for the divisional crown. What do you think about Baltimore? Because that's such a huge wild card in all this. Everybody talks about Lamar Jackson, how his style's not going to play too long. His career could be cut short. I mean, do you think Baltimore is enough to scare the Browns a little bit?
I think it should be. First of all, I love John Harbaugh, the coach. He might be my favorite coach in the league right now. And if I had to pick one guy, I like Andy Reid a lot too, but one of those two guys might be my choice, Sean McVay. I mean, the list, I guess, is growing as I think, but I've liked John Harbaugh for a long time, and I think he gets the most out of that team year in and year out. But the wild card is Lamar Jackson. They're going to run a quote-unquote tricked-up offense. It's going to be different. It's going to challenge teams. Now, the Browns have the benefit of seeing them twice a year, and they saw it at the end of last year how they play, and that will help. The familiarity will help. It's like when a team plays Army or, in the college football, you never see it, and it's tough to deal with. So, Baltimore could go 4-0 against the NFC division they play because it'll be so different. But I just know in this league, your quarterback needs to throw it when the defense knows he's going to throw it. And I need to see Lamar Jackson prove that. Now, he was good at Louisville. I mean, he was really good at Louisville, obviously. And I saw him make great throws. I also saw him miss some throws. The windows are tighter in the NFL. So that's the question mark. Now, he could be a guy that does it and is able to make enough off-schedule plays where they win games. And that can do, you You can break a tackle and make a scramble 50 yards, and that changes the whole game, and you don't need to make that third down completion. But I think over a long haul, whether that's 1 season or 3 seasons or 6 seasons, you need to stand in the pocket on 3rd and 7 and put it in a tight window, and I just need to see him prove that. So they're not going to go anywhere, but I think they're more of an 8-8 team than a 10-6 team.
Well, the Super Bowl is 5 months away, but everybody wants to know who you've got in the Super Bowl this year.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I don't know. I never go back and look, but my guess is my track record is not great on this. Usually I pick Green Bay because I think Aaron Rodgers is so good, and that's got me 1 Super Bowl win in the last decade. But having said that, I'm going to go with the Chiefs in the AFC. They were so good last year. They got most of the guys back. Tyreek Hill's back. Mahomes, we all know how incredible he is. They pick up Shady McCoy over the weekend, which Andy Reid knows him from Philly, will be fit in that offense seamlessly. And I think they get past New England this year. I think the experience of playing in that AFC title game, going to overtime, they get back and they go to the Super Bowl this year. And I think it's the Eagles on the other side. Then Carson Wentz, people overlook him because he was hurt. Nick Foles took that team to that Super Bowl championship 2 years ago. To me, Carson Wentz is an MVP type of player, and he was having that kind of year before he got hurt 2 years ago. I like their coach too, Doug Peterson. I love their offensive line. I like their defensive line, which are so critical in today's NFL. So I got Eagles, Chiefs, and I'm going to pick the Eagles to win a really good game.
That's got so many storylines around it, doesn't it? Andy Reid facing his former team and, the up-and-coming of Pat Mahomes. I'm not even sure if up-and-coming is an appropriate phrase to use with him anymore because he's already here. He's no longer up-and-coming at this point. But that would be a really fascinating matchup in the Super Bowl. But the beauty is we're 5 months away, right? So many things can happen between now and then.
And I'm sure I can change that pick between now and then, right?
Oh, you're allowed. No one's going to hold your feet to the fire when we come into early February for that. But obviously a lot of things we'll be watching for closely on Sunday. Going to be a lot of fun. And I guess one last question to ask about Sunday.
Yeah.
Did you have a prediction ready to rock and roll for week 1, or are you holding off?
No, I'll give you one. I got the Browns winning. And I haven't seen the spread. Early it was 4.5. I assume it's more now. I don't know if it's up to 6.5. But regardless, I got the Browns about 24-17 is my initial score. I'm going to have the Browns winning for sure. I'll set the score by Friday. But I'm thinking 24-17, 24-14, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't think their offense is going to erupt like some people think it could just because of the Mike Vrabel defense and the style of game Tennessee will play. But I do think you'll see the depth of the Browns' talent on both sides of the ball. And like I said, as long as they stop the run early, I think the Browns should be okay.
As of now, Scott's got the Browns not only winning but covering at this point as well. But that's a line I'm sure that will fluctuate a little bit between now and Sunday. 4.5 seems like a pretty good number. I think that's enough to get a lot of public money on the Browns, at least in the early stages of this thing as well. All right, my friend, we've come to that point in the show where normally I ask you about your golf shot of the week, but you've been off the golf course for a couple of weeks now. Has that back improved at all?
Yeah, the back's a little better. I could play right now. It's not perfect, but I could play. It's just that I've been working, not to whine, but I've been working a lot. We have Browns season preview stuff, and then we did the high school preview section. I worked week 1 in the office for high school football. I just haven't had a chance to get out and play. I haven't even hit balls. Like usually I can get out to hit balls for an hour or something. I haven't even done that. So it pains me, but I'm going to have to turn over golf shot of the week to you, Andy.
Yeah, well, if you've ever seen me golf, you would know just how much that pains not only Scott, but anybody that's ever golfed with me before if you're asking me for a golf shot. Now, I was fortunate enough to play in the Murphy family golf outing at Bobolink over the weekend, and if you're using more than 3 or 4 of my shots at a scramble, then things have gone horribly wrong. We didn't finish last. We finished second to last.
There you go.
But I think we used a handful of my shots. I think one of my best shots was probably my first one. Right off the tee, sometimes you're a little bit rusty. I didn't get a chance to go to the driving range beforehand to warm up, so I was thoroughly amazed, but I made great solid contact and socked it right down the center of the fairway. And then I actually sank a birdie putt.
Wow.
2 shots later, and it was all downhill from there.
Yeah.
So it started out well, but it did not finish well. But that was a pretty nice start to the golf outing, which, again, started really well but did not finish well. But Next week, we got to get you back out of the golf course,
I know.
man. We got to get your back fixed.
I know. I'm trying to. The problem is, this is a busy time of year. Maybe next Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll be able to get out. That's the goal, and maybe I can sneak out to the range between now and then.
Nice. So after the first game is over, you'll be able to get back out and on the course again.
Hope so.
Nice. All right, good
Sure hope
stuff.
so.
And before we wrap up, it does need to be mentioned, you guys did a fantastic job with that high school football preview.
Thanks.
That was really awesome. So many great stories in there. Not just the capsules on each team, but some of the special stories included in there too. Hey, you guys did an awesome job with that.
Thanks. Yeah, the writers put in a lot of time, so I'm glad it turned out okay.
Yeah, very, very good stuff. Looking forward to seeing your season preview for the Browns and the entire NFL this coming Thursday as well. Scott, as always, a pleasure to work with you. We'll look forward to doing this again next week when we get into the flow of the season.
Yeah, we can talk about a real game and look forward to a Monday night game. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to the season.
Very good stuff. Well, that's going to put a wraps on this edition of the BrownsZone.com Zone Coverage Podcast. For Scott Petrak, this is Andy Barch saying thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you again next week. Catch you again next week. Catch you again next week. Catch you again next week.